History.
We shall never surrender.
Politics.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony.
Current affairs.
Going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
Conspiracies.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
We'll stop terrorists from coming after us.
I just received a beautiful letter from Kim Jong-un.
It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons.
I'm not guilty of harassing anyone.
Well, I'm not a crook.
This is the Political Darkside podcast. And now, here's your host, Matthew Howland.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Today is the 11th of July, 2022, and this is the Political Darkside podcast. Joining me today is investigative journalist Johnny Vedmore, all the way from tropical Wales, that originally said Chile, to talk about the depopulation agenda of Klaus Schwab and his shady organization, the World Economic Forum. Johnny, welcome to my kitchen. How are you doing?
I'm very happy to be here, very happy to speak about anything you want to speak about. Life, man, everybody's feeling it right now. You know, everybody's feeling it. Everybody's feeling the pressure from all angles, and they know it's coming from somewhere, and we're all trying to work out, we're all trying to put our feelers out to work out where it's coming from. And some of us have some answers and others have other answers, so it's nice to be talking to someone new as well, man.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, well, hopefully you've got some of the answers. I mean, I've read some of your articles. You certainly seem to have pointing people in the right direction, at least, so that helps. Like you're saying about searching for answers, I mean, I'm probably like most other people in the last few years have been going through an existential crisis, given world news events. It forces uncomfortable questions about who's steering the ship. Many links recently seem to go back to Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum organization. You know, you've got COVID, cyber attacks, depopulation, eugenics, one world government. It all seems to be under one roof here. And I've very much gone into information overload the last week or so after we agreed to do this podcast. I think it would be good if we kind of did like an introductory lesson here for the listeners, because it strikes me that not a lot, or certainly not enough people know about this organization and just how important it actually is. So you've obviously researched, written, and spoken extensively about it. And I've enjoyed your articles on the Unlimited Hangout website. They're very well researched, very curious. How did Schwab and the World Economic Forum end up on your radar, and why?
I don't think it can. You can avoid it now. If you're doing research, at some point you're going to come across something that connects to the World Economic Forum. But they become the go-to place for the globalist agenda. And they've been that way for a long time. I mean, this isn't a new thing. For us, it's a new thing because a lot of the time when we ever heard of Davos, we saw it as like an external meeting point for all of these world leaders.
A skiing holiday they all went on.
Yeah. We assumed that, and in a sense, I mean, there's roots in that. If you go back to Klaus Schwab's earlier time just before Davos, he was in Davos skiing more than he was doing any politics. So it is very much that it was chosen because of that sort of, you know, there's lots of things to do for the elites and anybody who's lived in that region. I for a short time I worked in the Hilton Lyon, which is just over in France, just by the Alps, and I spent a bit of time in the Alps because, I mean, you do when you've got the Alps next door to you, you go down there and you have a little look around. And I went to a place like Grenoble, and I trod up the Vercors and stuff, and I had a little couple of jaunts into Switzerland itself, and you can feel it's an enclosed space. It's a place where we get to see the edges of it. when we want to go to a resort in Switzerland or to the Alps, we're going not necessarily to Switzerland, we're going to France or we're going to Italy, and we're seeing it from the other side of the mountains, because inside Switzerland, it's very much like it's a weird place. It's like a tomb in a sense. You know, it's one of the places where you can keep all your secrets really well hidden, and it's been built up for 100 years like that. And of course we know it from the Swiss neutrality. We hear that and we all think, oh well, that's nice, isn't it? There must be a kind neutral country, really nice. But what Swiss neutrality really meant is the Nazis and the authoritarian Americans and the authoritarian British and the authoritarian French could all hide their gold in the same place, and no one would question it, you know. So it's not really about us. Switzerland isn't about us. It's not about the poor. It's not about the working class. It's not about the middle class. It's about the upper class. And the north east of Switzerland, where you have things like Davos, and where Schwab originates from, because he comes from a place called Oberschwabia, which is partially within southwest Germany and partially in northeast Switzerland. And is where the Schwabish people come from, the people of Schwab. Lots of people who moved there in the past, who were looking to, and when I say the past, I'm talking like earlier than the 1900s, would change their name to Schwab. So there's a lot of Schwabs around. It's a region in itself which has its own identity, very much like Switzerland has its own identity. It has very much its own identity, given from a long history of really trying to negotiate peace between warring factions and regions that were all around it, where you've got the Francos up there and you've got the Swiss over there, you got the Lombardis and the Italians down there, and you got the Austrians over there, and you've got the Germans up there, and you got the Bavarians over there, or you got the Holy Roman Empire at one point, you got the Bavarians, you got all of these different regions that were all historically on the brink of war or trying to maintain some form of peace. And this was a very central area to that, which meant that I think that come out in the people. I've talked about this a lot, you know, this idea of, and I don't like I mean, I don't like that some things like this exist necessarily. It's weird when you study eugenics and things like that, because genetics and eugenic ideas have a place in reality. There's a place in reality. There's something to be said about people being a certain way and it coming from genetics. That is true. But the end result of where the negative people lead and to where someone like I would lead, me would lead, is completely different. So I see it as, oh, well, we should know better because we can see all of that. They say we should kill a certain member of the population who are of this gene pool. So you know, you don't have to see genetics as necessarily a negative thing, but there is a kind of mean gene co-interaction going on in that region, where the people who are brought up there are more likely to succeed if they've got their foot in trade, if they've got their foot in ability to negotiate between very extreme identities and parties. And I think that's where Schwab's family and ancestry has partially come from, because a lot of people, like I say, a lot of people moved to Schwabia. A lot of the ones who changed their name to Schwab initially, I think a lot of those guys were Jewish. The reason being that before I think it was about 1840, Jews were banned from entering Schwabia. They were banned completely. It was one of the most anti-Semitic, historically anti-Semitic regions in Germany before the war. And you know what happened in the war. So you know, it was probably about I think it was 1500s. There were blood libels, which were basically lots of people in the area believed that Jewish witches or Jewish priests were executing and torturing children in rituals. And so they basically killed everybody who was Jewish in the region. And then about over the next 100-odd years, bans came in on Jewish people being allowed in, because basically they said every time Jewish people come in, they get killed, and that's not good for our look. So we're just going to ban them. So it got to the point where there were, you know, a lot of people who were Jewish and came to Schwabia, they knew they weren't welcome, so they changed their names to Schwab and hid out there. I think that Klaus Schwab's great-grandfather was probably Jewish. He has definitely he's definitely somebody who didn't want to be known, hid around, went from one place to another, and it was his son Eugen Schwab, so Klaus Schwab's father, who was fundamentally seemed like any other Schwabian German, very much harnessed that Schwabian identity of trade throughout his life. He was, for the people who don't know, who haven't read the articles that I've written, he was a manager of a company called Escher Weiss, a factory called Escher Weiss. Escher Weiss was originally a Swiss factory, so a Swiss company. So they had a Swiss factory, and they had a factory in Schwabia. And those two were kind of separated by World War II. Not officially. I mean, officially they were still the same company, but you know, the Swiss got to have their fingers in the Nazi pie as well, and they did. So the Ravensburg factory was run by Eugen Schwab in Ravensburg, which is kind of the center of Schwabia, of Oberschwabia, and where Klaus Schwab would be born in 1938. And during the Second World War, Klaus Schwab's father, Eugen Schwab, was basically helping create his company, his factory, were helping create grand, massive turbines for the heavy water production for the Nazi atomic bomb project. So everybody knows about, up in Norway, you had the Nazi atomic bomb project trying to produce heavy water so they could produce their version of the atomic bomb. Slightly different than the split in the atom technique that was used by the Americans eventually, and in a sense the British. But there's things about that which are just horrific and terrible. That when you look into history, you discover more things about that, and you discover that the British didn't want to use the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Instead, they wanted to use gas the entirety of Tokyo and burn them alive as well at the same time, which is amazing. Like, you know, the Americans said, oh no, that sounds really nasty, we're going to drop atomic bombs instead. You know, that's the kind of options you were weighing up at the time. Now, Ravensburg had a special dispensation, I think you'd call it, during World War II, where they weren't getting bombed. The Swiss Red Cross, Swiss again coming in, saying, oh, you know, this is a place where we're going to do humanitarian aid, and so can you allies not bomb Ravensburg? And they said, all right, no problem, probably because the allies knew that the part of the atomic bomb project was going on there, and they wanted in. So, you know, each side had their own guys in power. I mean, Alan Dulles through the war, the future head of CIA, etc., creator really of the CIA, was based in Basel, I believe, in Switzerland, and his house was just like mixture between Germans and Americans coming in and out all of the time. And who is on whose side? Who really knows? Once you research it, you realize it ain't what is written in the history books. The people who were behind the scenes, who were doing a lot of this, were looking much further down the line than the war. That's as simple as it is. A lot of the time when we're watching things happen in the world, we're going, oh, but why are they doing this in reaction to that? But they're not. They're doing that as something in reaction to what they believe is going to come next. And that's something that we don't really take into account a lot of the time.
For the people listening to audio only, here is a transcript of the video playing on screen now from the World Economic Forum. 8 predictions for the world in 2030. Number 1. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Whatever you want you will rent. And it will be delivered by drone. Number 2. The US won't be the world's leading superpower. A handful of countries will dominate. Number 3. You won't die waiting for an organ transplant. We want transplant organs. We'll print new ones instead. Number 4. You'll eat much less meat. An occasional treat, not a staple. For the good of the environment and our health. Number 5. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. We'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. Number 6. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. This will help to make fossil fuels history. Number 7. You could be preparing to go to Mars. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space. The start of a journey to find alien life. Number 8. Western values will have been tested to breaking point. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten.
So they had people in Ravensburg. They were watching carefully. Of course, the atomic bomb project for the Nazis failed, but people like Eugene Schwab and others were important targets to get information from after the war as well. So I think I've heard I haven't seen evidence of this, but I have heard that he comes up in papers from CIA and other things afterwards. But really, the next point of there's a couple of points where Eugene Schwab tries to leave for Brazil at one point. Just after the war, not a surprise. Lots of people who were involved with the Nazis tried to do a runner.
Are you familiar with the Gerard Williams work?
No.
It was suggested to me on Twitter actually that you'd probably be like the natural successor to his work. He was a war correspondent in former Yugoslavia, I think. But anyway, he wrote a book about Hitler buggering off to Argentina, and he did that Hunting Hitler series.
That one was really weird. If you notice, one of the main people who were on it, I can't remember his name. He's the same guy who's interviewed who one of, I think he's like We Are Change or something, managed to get him on camera admitting something funny about September the 11th, and he's a right CIA stalwart. Is one of the guys who actually presented that program.
There's like an army guy who's on it with Gerard.
Yeah. One of the most suspicious men. That is one of the most suspicious men in the past 20 years in 30 years history of like planting information out there. But I do believe from all the research I've done, nearly every single Nazi went to South America. They had to go somewhere, and South America it's a weird place. It's a weird place because you can feel it, you can disappear out there, but there are a lot of pockets of German speaking people all around. So I've just got back about 3 days ago from Chile. And in Chile, every now and again, you'll see like a real Aryan-looking family speaking German. They don't speak the language. They don't speak Spanish or anything. They barely talk to anybody else. They keep to themselves a lot of the time. I think there's a lot of history of that, and I wouldn't be, I like evidence, and I've seen little bits of evidence. There's lots of evidence that the Nazis fled over there, and there's lots of evidence that state that people like Hitler were way too powerful just to be knocked off or die in a pit. So I believe it completely. I know that in this tale, that's one of the ways I was able to find Klaus Schwab's ancestry, because it took a long time. It took about 6 weeks, and the reason why he really came up on my radar was me and Whitney Webb, I'm talking about, was sitting in the kitchen in Chile, and she was like, "Why don't you do history like of ancestry about people? Why don't you do Klaus Schwab? It's just obvious. No one knows about who he is." And it was like that 5 weeks of real hunting, like depressing hunting as well. When you go through that sort of stuff, you don't get any sort of like leads at all for ages. You're just constant. You can't listen to what people say on Reddit or what people say on Twitter. It's just not enough. It's not enough to hear people pointing their fingers. And every time I did, it was like lots of people want to say that one of Hitler's closest confidants, who was from up in the north, I think from Frankfurt area, was like Julius Schwab or something, was Klaus Schwab's father. And it's just like it doesn't take long to work out that someone with that sort of ancestral line has their ancestral line published all over the place, and you can work out that there's no links there. I mean, it's really frustrating during that stage, but after that stage, once I'd found sort of the court documents. And the court documents, a lot of it was there was two. There was one where they were going over to Brazil in the 50s, and there is another one where basically Eugen Schwab was trying to get back his Swiss citizenship, because he never really had it. He was born in 1898, and his father, who was Gottfried Schwab, he went by the name of Gottfried Schwab, but his name, what was his first name? I can't remember. His first name was extremely Jewish, and then it was Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, and he went by the name Gottfried Schwab. And basically, those two documents showed that Klaus Schwab was the son of Eugen Schwab, and then it was easy to trace down Eugen Schwab. Well, easy if you got access to the Swiss newspaper archives, and because I'm lucky enough that I lived in France for a little bit of time, so I picked up a bit of French. I'm not scared of languages, and there's loads of translation apps, so I did a lot of like translating backwards and forwards, did a lot of hunting. What is interesting about it is that there's no punishment for anybody after the war. It's a start again. It's reset, just like Schwab likes. And it would be 1964 that this whole thing would start up again, because Schwab worked for Klaus Schwab. When he was younger, a teenager, he talks about working towards helping unite French and German people together in a post-war world, trying to ease the problems. Now, this is I find it quite the idea that the son of a Nazi is there trying to convince French people that they should trust Germans again. It makes me feel a little bit icky inside. And by 1964, Klaus Schwab was a very successful young student, and degrees and other qualifications were starting to be thrown at him. And I really mean thrown at him. He could go and study at a place for 6 months, and he'd get a degree that would take anybody else 2 to 4 years. So that's already, there's a lot of suspicion. In 5-year period, I think something like 13 honors and degrees that he picked up, and that's just insane. You've got to consider that something weird is going on there already. But give all that the benefit of the doubt. You find out that from Klaus Schwab's own words, that in 1964, his father, this old Nazi from a model Nazi company, the Ravensburg branch of Escher Weiss, was a model Nazi company in the books as model Nazi company. You're doing well. You're a proper Nazi. This guy would tell Klaus Schwab that the only place where he would be able to succeed in what he really wanted to do, whatever that means, is Harvard. And of course, Harvard at the time was the center of lots of things, but until you do really deep research, you don't understand how central it was to not only the past, but the future as well. And at this point, Schwab goes over and he says himself, I was not able to do a certain course. Instead, I was allowed to sit in on a seminar. Turns out it's Henry Kissinger's international seminar, and there is a lot to take in there. I mean, a lot, because Henry Kissinger's international seminar was a project. I'm going to have a full rundown of this come out soon, so I mean, I can tell you some details of it. And it was a project that really started in 1950, 1951, when the pilot version of the events happened. I think it was 50 people, students from around the world, international students, got brought to Harvard, and they were the pilot scheme under Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger had just graduated and he wanted to join the FBI, apparently, become some sort of like federal secret agent, but they refused that and said no. George McBundy and a guy who we'll talk about called William Yandell Elliott, who's one of the most important people in the history of America, especially unknown. Honestly, it's like I get my hair standing up on the back of my neck when I think of him, because he is such a sinister world we're entering here. These are the guys of the Council on Foreign Relations. Council on Foreign Relations, which a lot of people don't know about, is like an organization that was originally like set up as a branch of what was Chatham House in the UK, and is kind of like what the closest thing you can get to a secret government that is kind of out in the open, very Rockefeller headed. During this time we're talking about, David Rockefeller was the deputy president or chairman of the CFR. And a lot of the members who we'll talk about Henry Kissinger, CFR, William Yandell Elliott, CFR, John Kenneth Galbraith, CFR, Herman Kahn, CFR, all of these guys who actually helped Schwab up the ladder, all Council on Foreign Relations. And this is an organization that still exists today and still has people, extremely powerful people in all the positions. When the Ukraine war started, I noticed on the BBC nearly every single person I had a look at who was commentating on this war, who the BBC brought in, were all CFR. So it's like now it's as prominent as it was then. It's as dangerous and pernicious as it was then, an organization. And so William Yandell Elliott had originally set up this course, apparently. But by 1951, everybody was saying that it was Henry Kissinger's international seminar because he was running it. And even Henry Kissinger wrote to William Yandell Elliott and said, listen, I know it wasn't me who set this course up. I know it was you. But it wasn't really them either. The course was funded. It was funded by multiple people, but it came from ideas that sprouted from 1947 and the start of the CIA. So at the beginning of the CIA, there were certain people involved, heavily involved, and two of the people who were heavily involved in the creation, really changing what was the OSS, Operation of Strategic Services, or Office of Strategic Services, I believe. I'm so terrible with acronyms. I'm terrible with these things.
There's too many of them.
Yeah, I know. Well, they changed it to the CIA, and they invented the CIA eventually, and the CIA is, as everybody knows, Central Intelligence Agency. And at the start, it was a very messy Central Intelligence Agency, and it had really a kind of different angle on everything than it does now as well. So 1947, two of the main men were Allen Dulles and Kermit Roosevelt. And Kermit Roosevelt was the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt. Now, at the same time, you got Franklin Delano Roosevelt was at this time during the war. The president died in 1944, I believe, or just at the end of 1944, 1945. But they were like seventh cousins or something. Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt. So they're not exactly the same line. But both sides of the Roosevelt, a lot of the Roosevelts were heavily involved in not only in politics but in high society. Eleanor Roosevelt was seen as the most influential woman in America, maybe even in the world at that time. You know, she could really push out, and she really did push out agendas. And Kermit
UNICEF she started, or was it the?
I don't.
One of the organizations.
Yeah. She starts a lot. She started lots of things like that, and they were all extensions of really the American power base, intelligence agencies, and other things. Kermit Roosevelt definitely. He was OSS throughout the war, and then he became CIA. He created. Now they were. This was a different time. Completely different time. Okay, so they created something called the American Friends of the Middle East, and the American Friends of the Middle East was the funding program that the CIA would eventually use to fund the international seminar, Henry Kissinger's international seminar, where Klaus Schwab went through to get his contacts, to get boosted up, to get his help from the members of Harvard who Henry Kissinger put him in touch with, like John Kenneth Galbraith and Herman Kahn, who would help him eventually create the World Economic Forum through that CIA-funded seminar. It started there in really 1950, 1951, and they received funding from this these friends, American Friends of the Middle East. Now, what's weird and what a lot of people won't be able to kind of fathom at first is that was an anti-Zionist organization. So a lot of people, because of the current paradigm in the world, believe that all things are Zionist in some way. All of these big sort of efforts to control the world are somehow to do with, you know, that was to take power away from people in the Middle East. But what happened was after World War II, you have the Soviets versus the West, and Soviet infiltration was well ahead of American infiltration. They had started youth groups as early as big ones as early as 1919, and had some of the members of the Soviet military and the intelligence services had realized straight away they needed to create these membership associations that recruit young people for revolution. And the Americans by 1947 realized that they were well behind, and they would have to do the same. They would have to create young people who could lead Europe away from Soviet infiltration and penetration, but the same with the Middle East, because while Europe was one of the main battlegrounds straight after the war, ideological battlegrounds for use of propaganda against each other, places like North Africa were seen as extremely liable to fall to Soviet persuasion. You know, the Soviet argument for a lot of people in the Middle East back then, when they looked at America, they saw what a lot of us see now, a grotesque monster without any sort of ethics or morals, and willing to do whatever they can to seize power and keep control without any identity or knowledge of where they're going with that. It's just for the control and power, so that the next step can be achieved, whatever it may be. You know, they saw it as kind of a grotesque monster, and they felt like they had to change that idea of what America was in the Middle East. So a lot of emphasis in that period, late 40s, early 50s, was put at places like the Middle East, where they could stop the Soviet revolutions from happening, because if Soviet revolutions happened in the Middle East, it would undermine European security completely. You would have a Soviet bloc that came all the way down and underneath Europe, rather than just on the one side. It's not just East anymore, it's East and South. You know, that was something they could not allow in. And to be perfectly honest, I think a lot of this was all naive, because a lot of people who are from the Middle East don't like either of these ideologies at all. They're very much into their religion. They're into Islam, and neither of these really mixed very well. But if there was one that mixed better than the other, it was the idea of communism, and the Americans were really understanding of that. So they put a lot of effort into tackling that, and they put together a team, you could say, the American Friends of the Middle East, who went by another name. I can't quite remember what the name was before. Went by another name before, and they weren't liked in America even. I mean, what they were doing was suspicious to everyone, because obviously it was they were trying to undermine governments, so they were trying to infiltrate governments, and they were trying to persuade people in certain ways. But there also was a lot of, I would say, I hate to say this because I'm everybody feels comfortable in the rhetoric, but there was a lot of honesty to it. There was a lot of fear from a lot of people like Kermit Roosevelt that they were heading towards something that was going to be unstoppable, that it would be a rolling ball downhill, and we would see sweeping communism win the day and take over everything. And communism is built upon the foundation of revolution and propaganda, and so none of us would be safe. And a lot of that continued afterwards as well, of course. Now, let's flick forward in time a bit, through the 50s, while Henry Kissinger's running this international seminar. The international seminar was run at the Harvard Summer School, and the Harvard Summer School has always been slightly suspicious. It's been the place where where they do projects that they wouldn't do during normal term times, or the intelligent people who go to Harvard might notice what they're doing. So they do everything at these summer schools, and this was a really big project, and went on for a long time. This wasn't just through, it was proven that the CIA funded through the American Friends of the Middle East, funded this seminar between 1960 and 1966. That's out in the open, known fact. Lots of people, and one of the big things, lots of people didn't know that was the time when Klaus Schwab went to this seminar, that he was going to a CIA-funded course, and they don't know about the after bit either. Of course, that the connections with them continue. But there's other people later on as well. Benazir Bhutto, I think it was. She's a Pakistani lady. Yeah, well, her father was heavily involved with trying to get the Pakistani nuclear bomb, and successfully, partially due to Henry Kissinger's manipulations, because Henry Kissinger was really strong against Pakistan having the nuclear bomb. No, you can't have the nuclear bomb. And then he went to France and said, drop your special laws that you have to allow them to create this thing, and then they'll be able to have the nuclear bomb. So it may, what they did in front of the cameras is different from behind. Now, she went to Harvard as well. She was the person who her mentor was the son of John Kenneth Galbraith. There was an agenda here, and the agenda came from the 50s. They worked out, they did a lot of, because Henry Kissinger wasn't only doing the international seminar, he was also doing think tanks, working groups, as they called them, on what was going to happen with nuclear warfare. And so he had decided by late 50s, between 56 and 59, when he wrote a load of different papers, that there was not going to be any nuclear war because it would be assured mutual destruction. So the likelihood that anybody would, I can't remember who it was, said for every one finger on their button, there's 15 fingers pulling that button upwards. There's so many, there were so many things in place, so many strategies in place to stop an accidental firing of nukes or a malicious firing of nukes that could start the war, that it no longer made it plausible that one side would. But the fear was there, and they loved that fear. It kept people under control until about 1960s, where people started to panic. Late 50s and 60s, people started to panic about the idea that we're constantly under the threat of doom and destruction all of the time, and normal people started to crap themselves. And then you have like people like Herman Kahn, who worked alongside these working groups to an extent, but was part of the Hudson Institute, which was part of the Rand Corporation. And he was doing game theory, working out the likelihood of what would happen in each situation as it unfolds, as it concerning nuclear warfare, nuclear deterrence, and other things. And he also worked out on thermonuclear war in the early 60s, 1961, I believe. He wrote that basically there was no chance of it. Unless it was a complete accident beyond comprehension that we can't comprehend of, or just a malfunction or something like this, there is no chance that we're going to have a nuclear war. It's just assured mutual destruction, and it's just so stupid and irrational to live under this blanket of fear. And within 3 years, they had created Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which showed the same thing. You know, people, American base with everybody shooting each other, and no one knows what's going on, and that's how that was really a projection of what the people were like, what the mentality was like, when you kind of think of it like, oh, there will be definitely nuclear war. They got over that. They got over it. Now we're back there. We're back there now. Now we're hearing the same rhetoric that we heard in the 50s. But these guys got over it, and they decided something else needed to happen. And that something else really was everybody needed nuclear bombs. If you wanted to stop one country firing against another, like Pakistan and India, for instance, you got India and Pakistan right next door to each other. They hate each other. They got loads of history. They actually had a very short amount of history because Pakistan was a very new country, but they still have a lot of history culturally speaking. And India didn't, they have disputed regions and etc. Same as happened with China and India. China invaded India at one point, which not a lot of people know about, and that's all around the same time as China getting nuclear weapons as well, and then India getting nuclear weapons. It's all very suspicious. Like, once the conflict's about to start and one side gets nuclear weapons and the other side suddenly gets nuclear weapons, because the powers that be know that they need them. Otherwise, that one will fire nuclear weapons on the other, and it could cause nuclear war all over the place, and we don't want that. So everybody has to have nuclear weapons.
It kind of makes the whole thing pointless, though, because the original idea of nukes was to eliminate the idea of war. But once everybody gets them, all that happens is you just have the traditional warfare anyway, and nobody goes to the extreme to finish it. So that's why you see in Russia and Ukraine having, more traditional warfare when Russia could finish it if they really wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, Russia could finish it with its army. Russia could finish Ukraine with just its army in no time. This is a show. If it was really a war, I mean, the definition of a war, then Ukraine would already be fallen. It would already be gone. The idea that people want to die when they know that if they press a button or they go into a war that they will definitely die, it's not something that people want to do anymore. They've had all of the propaganda, the movies, the films, the books. They know about the devastation of war. We're well educated upon it now, especially modern warfare, and how pointless it is. And a lot of it, Tesla's death ray was really about that idea about if anybody does anything, then the whole world can be destroyed with a death ray. Well, that's really what nuclear weapons became, and what people don't understand nowadays is we've got a load of paradigm shift in technologies coming that are as powerful or have the ability to have the impact on society, on our lives, as nuclear weapons and atomic weaponry did in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But I was going
to ask about Russia and Ukraine later on in regards to the membership of the World Economic Forum. But in terms of nuclear weapons, from your articles, the Klaus Schwab actually follows in his father's footsteps in terms of trying to get nuclear weapons into South Africa, does he not?
Yeah. Well, you see, he's put in charge in 1967. Once he does this CIA-funded international seminar, he comes home and Escher Weiss, when his dad run the factory, was directed by a guy called Jacob Schmidt-Heine, and his son Peter Schmidt-Heine would take over from Jacob Schmidt-Heine, and he would phone up Klaus Schwab, keeping the families aligned. He would phone him up in 1967 and say, "You've done it." This is Klaus Schwab's words, and they're all very carefully worded. And when you see Klaus Schwab making carefully worded anecdotes of the past, you know there's more to it. That hunt it, work it, do a Rubik's Cube on the words and work out, because you'll find more information from it. That's what I discovered from Schwab. And when he says out loud, Peter Schmidt-Heine, he phoned me and he said, "Now you know about modern business management. Why don't you come and help with our merger of Schulze AG and Escher Weiss?" And so along he comes. He's going to help merge a company which I think is called Brown Boveri, Escher Weiss, and Schulze together, and it would end up just being Schulze AG. For a short time, it would be Schulze Escher Weiss, and the idea was to make sure that each part of each company, remnants of the company, would work on different things and would be aligned in a different way, so they wouldn't be working on the same things, but would then basically become the same company, Schulze. And he went through, he was put in charge as the head of this merger. He was second in charge of the company under Peter Schmidt-Heine. He went through making this merger, and at the same time, Schulze AG was supplying the nuclear technology for nuclear bombs to the South African apartheid regime, in an order to try and help them make the nuclear bomb. So he had just come from the center of this, like Harvard, where all of these people who said, were secretly making sure everybody had the nukes, and he goes straight to a company where he helped supply someone else with the nukes. Now, South Africa was a really weird one to supply with nukes, because it's not like Zimbabwe next door is going to get nukes. Zimbabwe didn't exist, I don't think, at that time. They didn't have any competition surrounding them. They were the richest, most powerful country, and only grown to be more like that. So why would they need nuclear weapons? And isn't it such a terrible thing to give such a racist apartheid regime? Have you learned nothing? Well, no, they haven't learned anything, have they? They keep going through this route, which is supply these guys with the bombs, keep everybody with the bomb, keep everybody in fear. And, for us, if we research it, we can understand, okay, there's not going to be any nuclear warfare. But for most people, the majority of people, 97% of the population, they believe with nukes being around, there will be potential for nuclear warfare. They don't understand how it actually works when you play it all out, and when you have it in the weighing like it does, balancing like it does, with them having nukes and them having, they don't understand that. So yeah, Klaus Schwab went and did the same thing directly after attending the CIA funded course full of people who were doing this sort of committing these sort of acts, doing this sort of behavior. I would like to say committing these sort of crimes, because I think they're crimes. I think what they're doing, causing fear and causing potential for mass casualty events, is criminal. And the two people who would, of course, be handed over to by Kissinger to look after Klaus Schwab and to help him set up the World Economic Forum were John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the most famed economists of American history, who taught John F. Kennedy and others, who every time I follow his trail, it's just it's a hidden secret government. It's the hand of the secret government. And Herman Kahn, the real Dr. Strangelove, who was the person in the Hudson Institute going through all of these things. They would come to help him set up the World Economic Forum. Galbraith would be joint keynote speaker. Von Habsburg was also a keynote speaker at the first event. So he wasn't the only keynote speaker. There were two. And it... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just before we do the origin of the World Economic Forum, just to go back to the South Africa thing, whilst you were researching that, does his name crop up in relation to Project Coast?
No, they're very careful how they worded. Now, I can go and look into that, and I will probably be looking into that eventually, because I am traipsing through the history of Klaus Schwab, and it is like convoluted, messed up, really hard to find stuff, but I'm getting through it. There's like, I got 3 articles lined up. One's almost ready to go out, but 3 articles lined up that are really important to this whole understanding process. And I haven't even got to the stuff where it's the technological aspects of what Schwab was involved in during that period, including CERN. I mean, he was involved in some of the top projects, and people just do not realize his reach. They do not realize who this man is. They do not realize who taught him. They do not realize who his father was. They do not realize what he's done in the past. They do not realize anything about him. To everybody, they've framed him as this octogenarian, kind old man, and that framing has been mainly over the past 20 years through his right-hand guy Edelman and Edelman PR, who the PR firm that basically run 2/3 of the PR for all companies.
He's almost actually become like a comedy Dr. Evil in a lot of people's minds, but it is more a case of he is just plain evil when you actually get down to the brass tacks of it. But yeah, sorry to interrupt. You were going to explain the origin of the actual World Economic Forum.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that he between 1969 and 1971, Klaus Schwab is obviously getting help to form the World Economic Forum. You've got John Kenneth Galbraith and Herman Kahn coming over during this period to help persuade others. He had to bring them over, and he says this himself. All of this isn't me making this up, or this isn't me not being able. This is things he has said himself, and he says a lot of things that he shouldn't say, and that he should. But he has a real. I think he doesn't believe that anybody can work out what really happened, that no one's really going to be able to follow it through, that they've done enough disinformation, they've got rid of enough of the information out there that they don't have to worry about it. They went across to make sure that they could set it up the way they liked it. And it was really an American-led effort to create what was originally it's called the World Economic Forum now, but originally it was the European Management Symposium, then the European Management Forum, and then in the 90s, if you're coming up to the 90s, it started to be rebranded the World Economic Forum once it had established itself as obviously more than European anyway. And the first project, the first forum went really well. They had these big figures there. People were really into it. And the second one dipped completely. People weren't so interested. They were about to lose out. And then, of course, as I explained, it ended up being both of the articles that I wrote about his founding, because Aurelio Pecci was invited to be the keynote speaker on behalf of the Club of Rome for the 1973 edition. I think they were still taking place in January. So 1972, they had written, Club of Rome had produced The Limits to Growth. And that was basically, as the keynote speech says in 1973 World Economic Forum, the enemy of humanity is humans themselves. and the idea was that the population has to be reduced if humans are going to be successful in the future. That was the start of something which saw an ideological split from the founders, really from the people who'd helped, not the official founders, the people who had founded behind the scene and helped Schwab into it. Herman Kahn did not like that idea at all. He would spend the rest of his life rebelling against that idea, changing the way he spoke about things as well. If you watch Herman Kahn speaking in like the mid-60s, he's saying, why don't we just put a tranquilizer in the water supply? By the mid-70s, he's like saying stuff like, no, we don't need limits to growth. We can go into space and we can get all the resources we need, and we don't need to worry about those things. We need to worry about peace on Earth and being kind to each other. We don't need to get rid of the population. Now, the population agenda wasn't just Club of Rome. The reason why it was boosted up by Schwab is because it was already there. The Rockefellers, where all of this are really come the project to create this international seminar that would produce such leaders as Klaus Schwab came from the Rockefellers, who wanted that ability to control population. That they've been Malthus from the first moment they read about Malthus. They read about the idea, Thomas Malthus being the Malthusian ideal, that while your resources grow, the population is always will grow a little bit faster, meaning you don't have enough resources. So the only way for everybody to be happy is to have less population, disregarding the fact that then you won't be able to have enough resources because your population is less. But don't worry about that. Let's kill everybody. That's what Malthus is all about, really. So it's a complicated. The start of the World Economic Forum was a complicated thing, but by the time it got to the 80s, Henry Kissinger declared victory for what they wanted. What really, during the 80s especially, they wanted was to make, it seems like anyway, to make China king. To make China the new place. It was going to be the future. They had kind of created it. It had been created and pressured in such a way that China had been like a subservient slave state, but they knew that wasn't going to happen. That wasn't going to be that way forever. Eventually, it will boom, and when it does, they will be in control. They kind of run through the next levels of what they expect to happen, and they don't care about nationalism. They don't care whether it's America taking over. They don't care about all of that. They just see their future. They say, that's what the future is going to be. Let's follow it. So there's where we are now, and the 90s, we can start talking about that and what happened in the World Economic Forum then, because that's really where we are now.
Well, I was going to ask, how does the forum evolve from its original? Well, you've essentially answered this, and how it evolves from its original ideology to, let's say, pre-2019. I mean, you mentioned the Edelman PR firm. One of the quotes from one of your articles says that for Edelman, appearing ethical is much more important than being ethical, and it strikes me that the wording around the World Economic Forum is just like a constant, like business speak word salad to kind of hide the actual agenda that they're pushing. And they've very much reached a point during and through COVID where they have now come to everyone's attention. Because, I mean, prior to 2019, I probably wouldn't have known who they were, or if I'd heard of them, I probably would have written them off as like another non-governmental organization think tank. Like, my focus would have been more on things like the Bilderberg Group or a general concept of the New World Order. So, yeah, I mean, the 90s, you say it escalates a bit. Probably the one Tony Blair attends.
It's even more. I mean, they know what's going to happen before it happens, mainly because if they get their people in power, if they get their people in positions of certain power around the world, they know they can influence things. Now, I think that Gorbachev, being in power, had the Americans dancing. I believe he was the West's man. He was a man who was a lot of people in Russia were like, we want to come out in from the cold. We can't do it publicly because of all of the shame and ridicule attached for all we've done before, and for like losing. We can't be seen as losers, so we got to be seen as something new. We need a man who can do that. And the American man in Russia was Gorbachev, and Gorbachev, with him, they knew what was coming. They knew there would be the fall of the wall. They knew there would be the fall of this supposed fall of this dynamic East versus West dynamic, the Soviets versus the West. And in a sense, that's true. You know, you can have David Hasselhoff playing on top of the wall. And I remember I was like 9-10 years old when that was going on. And it was like, wow, everybody's so happy and they're so excited to show him pictures of these guys destroying this wall. And Mr. Gorbachev, bring down that wall, whatever. Oh man, it's all happening. Well, it wasn't happening at all. This was all part of the process of reforming. And in the early 90s, they already had put into action these sort of ideas of how to train up the future, the post Cold War era people. And that would start in about 92, 93 with Global Leaders for Tomorrow project.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. Mm-hmm. I'm with the president, who is a young global leader.
But they knew that they needed something special for the Russians. Now, what I've heard, and I've seen some slight evidence of this, and I'm sure I'll be able to get more detail when I get round to it, that the first Russian Patriot project was launched at the same time as the Global Leaders for Tomorrow, and for that 3 Russians were selected. One of them were Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, in the early 90s, around before the fall of the Berlin Wall, late 80s, early 90s, was well known. He was well known as being one of the top KGB guys who was going forward in the future and would probably be president one day. When eventually he was made president, it was Boris Yeltsin turning around to him and saying, "That's your new president," and that was it, basically. That's your guy. And it was selected very early on, and he was put through the process very early on, and he went through a special World Economic Forum funded course that wasn't the Global Leaders for Tomorrow, which the next year would be called Young Global Leaders, because the first year didn't go so well because they started. What's amazing for this project, and what people really should look at, is that it's the same as Kissinger's international seminar. In actual fact, all of the World Economic Forum became like the summer school, like Harvard summer school. If you go to Harvard Summer School back in the 60s and 50s and you start researching it, it's indistinguishable from what the World Economic Forum is. And the World Economic Forum was the Americans literally copying and pasting the international seminar along with the Harvard Summer School directly on into a European dynamic, which they would then be able to impact some way and cause to go in with the direction they wanted. And this, the Young Global Leaders Project, was the international seminar, was the way to choose young global leaders. You know, so through the international seminar, people like Pierre Elliott Trudeau went through there as well. So Justin Trudeau's father, who when I research, I'm like, is he related to William Yandell Elliott? I think he might be related to William Yandell Elliott, but I haven't got round to that fully yet. But there is actually like there's a lot of things we don't know about this. First, the Henry Kissinger's international seminar, but when the things you do know, you see it's just that. It's just what was it did. We are repeating the same. Schwab has repeated the same things of the past over and over again, and he calls them new, and they rebrand it as being new. So Edelman PR are there, and Edelman PR really started doing like propaganda, full-on propaganda for them in 2000, and really started pushing out, because I think of the internet. Basically, the internet had got to a point where they could then affect things globally, and the propaganda would be global. And so Edelman saw the point at that point of that period of time, saying, "Oh, let's do it, because we've now got all of these leaders to push out." And I think Tony Blair may have been 1994 or 1993.
I think.
Yeah, he's one of those. There's loads of them, thousands of thousands. And they want you to think right now that it's only a handful of people went through these programs. I've seen the list, and I don't know where to start. There's so many obvious. I mean, for in my country, see people like Ed Miliband's, Ed Balls, and Yvette Cooper, all really being head of the Labour Party during a certain period of time. You know, they're all there. They're all there, being taught the ways of the dark side. They're being taught the way of the World Economic Forum, and these courses are like, do you hear anybody speaking about them? Oh, I went on this course and it was like this. Well, you do at the first one, and the first one they asked a lot of questions. The Global Leaders for Tomorrow course, they asked a lot of questions, and the next they told them nearly straight away, okay, we're shutting down the course. And then the next year they restarted it as global young global leaders, because quite simply we don't want too many questions asked, and we've got to be more careful about who we choose to represent us. And now
I think the problem that the public has is like the disconnect between the idea that all these leaders are meeting up and getting a bit of training probably in advance, which a lot of people probably just write off as like, oh, okay, that's fine. How is that any different to go into like Oxbridge or whatever? But when you're adding in the ideology of what this organization actually stands for, it's that marriage, and it's the sheer scale of it, which when you look into the ideology, it all seems a bit far-fetched. And like I said, until you look into who's actually turning up to these events and the influence that they have. You mentioned Tony Blair, there's Bill Gates, Bono, Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Mark Zuckerberg, who is actually a robot, Jeff Bezos, Leonardo DiCaprio. It just goes on and on and on, and they've all got their own special area of interest.
I think it's Scientology without the spiritualism at times. It's all without the over pomp. It's almost like they are. It is the training of the technocrats, And the technocrats is interesting because originally technocracy was a membership association that was set up in the 30s. So I think it's still kind of like that. You have to kind of sign up for technocracy. You have to do your digital signature because it's such a weird ideology anyway. But if someone tells you that's going to be the future, and unless you're on board, you will have no power, and the evidence is that is the future, and if you're not on board, you have no power, then you will believe it. As someone who wants power or wants influence, you will believe that. You will just hook, line, and sinker. Okay, I'm in. And that's what a lot of these people have done, I think. They've been told, like Klaus Schwab's father said to him, if you want to succeed, you've got to go there. And what Klaus Schwab doesn't say in that is probably because his father was saying, because that's where Henry Kissinger is, that's where the nuclear debate is going on, and that's why the power is there right now. The World Economic Forum Young Global Leader was about installing Young Global Leaders project, and that era was, in the 70s you had the World Economic Forum being created and trying to recruit. In the 80s, they had got to the point where they were able to set out their stall. In the 90s, they're able to set out their leaders, create their leaders. From 1997 onwards, they're able to install their leaders into power. Now we're in a situation where the majority of people who have power are somehow infiltrated or motivated by those members of the World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders cult, and they believe that will continue to give them power, because the evidence is, if Tony Blair was the longest serving prime minister for how long, if you
13 years, I think.
Yeah, that's a long time. How long did Margaret Thatcher stay in power for? I think it was
11.
Yeah. So I
10.
mean, I think you're about right. 11, 10. I mean, the thing is that
Blair's 10 years. Brown takes it for a bit before Cameron comes in 2010.
He comes in 1997.
Yeah.
So, okay, I thought it was about 13 years.
I think he leaves in 2007.
That's a long amount of power that's a long time
Yeah.
to hold power in a democracy as well. Over a decade is a long time to keep the reins of power. So for the evidence there for these people, you want to be in power one day? Okay, take this course, because look at all these people who are in power. The evidence is all there. Now, what they're not being told is that in between there's going to be an ideological clash where you're going to have to say a lot of things that are lies to be able to get where you want to go. And you're going to have to hide a lot of things. And really, what it becomes when you analyze it properly is indistinguishable from early communist propaganda. So the idea in the early days, Lenin would say, would be he would teach people nearly all of the time propaganda. You just got to use your propaganda skills to change people's mind. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter, as long as it suits the purpose of the entire movement. That's all that matters, and that is exactly what they're doing. When you actually look at what happens when you have a small amount of rich elite who create this underclass that are all basically the same level of wealth and have the same amount of input in society, that is creating communism. In a sense, they knew, and I've read this over and over again in different things I'm researching, they kind of knew that communism was going to be the winner at the end of it. The communist ideal was going to win out as being, there's these guys on top and all of these guys subjugated below. We just got to make it in our vision and not the Soviet vision. And so what we see now with the World Economic Forum is kind of like hyper techno communism, mixed with little elements of fascism, mixed with little elements of this and that, helps to keep everybody in line. helps things that introducing things and techniques that help them to stop people from rebelling and stop the revolution aspect of communism. But really, what what they're aiming for is creating a society that's all on the same level, that all have to just accept whatever we're told from above because it's right for the people. And a lot of that is being told as well now. AI is coming and you won't even understand what you're being told. You'll just have to do it.
Well, they have that mantra of you will own nothing and be happy. They like to push that. I mean, do you think, given that they did the Cyber Polygon event, do you think they're capable of knocking off the internet, resetting the bank accounts, and then leaving us to starve for a couple of weeks, and then when they switch everything back on, we're into the full-blown Great Reset economics that they want us to be subjugated to?
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
I think they're capable of believing that they can achieve that, and they're not capable of actually achieving that. So I think that however much they the propaganda works two ways. They tell everybody it's going to be this way, you're going to live life this way, but I mean, then you've got to actually create it. But the thing is after telling people for long enough, you believe your own bull. You believe it yourself. So a lot of these guys think that they can do this. And because of that, they're heading blindly into a situation where they are going to fail miserably. And it's going to be at the cost of us. Hey, I go into over in, it's really bizarre. Over in Chile, they don't recycle. You can't flush toilet paper down the toilet. You have to put it in the bin and all that because the pipes are still too small. They don't do anything like that we would see as virtuous for the environment, really. They don't do any of that. But they've got all of the propaganda that kind of revolves around that and the virtue signaling and all of that. Yet they don't do a lot of the virtuous stuff that is being done elsewhere. But they can ignore it because none of their population knows any different. None of their population knows that it's different elsewhere. So none of their population knows that the rest of the world is trying to recycle, or the rest of the world is trying to do this or that. They don't know this sort of stuff. They just keep plodding along. And there is a lot about not giving them information. A lot of people in Chile just don't get information. So they've, like I said before we started the show, they're all still fully masked up there. Everybody walking around in the street, 7 o'clock in the morning, people walking by on their own for miles with masks on, scared that they're going to catch a virus. People who aren't vaccinated and don't have vaccine passports sitting outside restaurants to eat while everybody else sits inside. And the whole implementation of the QR codes and stuff like that. Well, they're advancing in certain parts of technology there and not in other parts of technology. And they're advancing so fast that they're ahead of what Britain are in things like QR codes. You don't have a menu anymore in a place and someone who comes over and serves you. You have to scan your phone onto it and then you do it through there. And what they're trying to do is already there, create something that they is going to be the future over here before they've even created the technology that backs up. Because at the end of it, what you have is you have no phone signal in loads of areas. You've got no ability. Like if they wanted to do 5G in that country, it'd be impossible because you need things all close to each together. The actual antennas, whatever they call them, all close together, functioning for a 5G network to work. It doesn't work at all over there. They haven't got loads of parts of the technology, and what you end up in a restaurant going, but this doesn't work. And them going, yeah, I know. And you go, so how can I How can I eat food? And they got to go to their manager and get a special phone and be like, there you go. It costs that much. Okay. Can I pay in cash? We don't really take cash, but our card machines don't really work. Oh, okay, right. So the technology is nowhere near ready, and you're already implemented it. You're already everywhere. It's already implemented. It does not work. And it's like, for them, it doesn't matter how much hardship it causes for the people. It doesn't matter how stupid it looks. Keep doing it, because then eventually the technology will improve by itself. That's not the way things work, and that's what they're doing. They're just introducing things without the technology being ready at all, because they've been told technology is just around the corner. And what you end up with is what's called tech evangelists, people who have to go out there and to create these technologies to be correct and to work well. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Loads of things that we want, that they want to implement, aren't ready to be implemented, yet they're still saying it is. And at the same time, they're trying to ramp up the idea that AI is already just around the corner, that a real quantum AI robot is going to soon be able to tell you how to live your life, and you should listen to him because he's right, or it's right, even though we all know that it's just a guy sitting behind a curtain typing in the buttons still, because there is no AI. They did a lot of programming on some like the idea of what AI is to me and you, the idea of what AI is in reality, as two different things. AI is something that thinks by itself in what they want to create, with what they want to create. It's something that thinks by itself and can give you answers. The AI we've got right now isn't that. It's programmed by people, and it tells you what they want you to do and what they want you to know. And that's where we are. We're in a situation where they're going to take certain things away from you, take things like money away from you, and you won't have any other option apart from their option, and their option won't work very well.
Well, at least we'll still be able to get a robot kangaroo from Klaus's wife.
I'm not sure we will. I'm not sure we will. I don't think you'll be able to order them. You'll be clicking the button. It'll say, "Sorry, payment denied. Payment denied." And it'll be something to do with your social credit score, because someone with the same name as you flashed their bum out of a window or something. It's literally it's a joke that's falling apart around. Most of us realize you can't even. You've got cars that they may be petrol cars coming out, they still break down all the time. It's not like we've reached the pinnacle of that technology where we can actually, all of these things around us. You buy a TV, we know it's got built-in obsolescence, and you know that in 5 to 10 years time it's just going to stop working. It's going to go funny on the one side and then funny on the other side, and then not work completely, like every TV that I bought in the past 15 years that does that. We're not entering into a new world unless there's a new world on the other side, and there's no new world on the other side. All it is messing with you, messing with us, while they're not interested. They don't want to sit there and play around on virtual reality. They've got their big amount of land. They've got all their servants. They sit round on the table. People cook them food like in the old days, and they pay people cash probably to keep it off the books. So what they're introducing is not ready. And is just not going to solve our problems. The people who stand down and say we're going to introduce things that will solve your problems are usually the people who are trying to take something from you without doing any work.
Yeah, I mean, the good news, you mentioned propaganda. The good news is that whilst the World Economic Forum's rose to prominence, so too has an awareness of what they're doing. You see quite a lot of videos on Russell Brand's YouTube where he's talking about them. I was actually having a look at some of the reviews of one of Klaus Schwab's books, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, or The Fourth Reich. Here's a couple of the highlights. One person described it as dysfunctional, sick-minded book, all about controlling the masses whilst the elite do as they please, not even good enough for a doorstop. Somebody else said, "What can you say? This is an important historical document in the same way that Mein Kampf is an important read to get into the mind of an insane person. who has to go on to cause immense suffering and death. It seems clear to me that we'll look back on this book in the same way. And somebody else said, Klaus Schwab should be up for crimes against humanity. He'll own nothing and be happy. Everyone should read this genocide manifesto. Have you read said genocide manifesto?
I've scanned through bits of it. Yeah, I mean, I've been told loads of little bits, but I tell you, I'm too busy looking into the real facts and not into what an old man with a robo boner wants me to believe, because that's really, I mean, really, the one thing that I discovered about Klaus Schwab that really tells me who he is as a person, and where that robo boner statement probably comes from, is that when Herman Kahn wrote the year 2000 in 1967, he noted down all the technological advances that we would see up until around the year 2000. So most of them haven't been met yet, but they are on their way. And he back then, when that was written, fundamentally that would have blown the minds clean off people. This was all new technology that was all around the corner. For us now, it's a third of it's achieved, a third of it's on its way, and a third of it is going to subjugate us and kill us. You know, even Herman Kahn himself said, we cannot introduce all of these new technologies until we are ready as a society to be able to handle the power and the responsibility that comes with said technologies. Instead, Klaus Schwab, and this is what I mean, Klaus Schwab saw that list and saw it as a tick sheet of what he wanted to do. If we can get through all of these, then we can be the most powerful people around. We can be the most advanced without listening and heeding the warnings. And I think that's partially goes to the idea that they want to create global issues. They want to create a massive amount of dead people because that fits their agenda of depopulation, an agenda which now they've put it in so many different places. I mean, even Rockefeller himself in his book says, people have accused me of being into depopulation and wanted to see a reduction for all of these reasons. And it's true. That's exactly what I want, and I don't care about it at all. I'm happy about it. I'm proud to be. You know, it came from that sort of hubris has been echoing through the ages, and now that scares the hell out of people. And people like Adam and PR and stuff, I'm 100% that they would have been in the past couple of years saying, okay, we need to get rid of the Georgia Guidestones pretty soon. We need to get rid of other signs that we've planned for a reduction in population pretty soon, because otherwise they're going to keep using that against us, and it works really well because all of the evidence is there and it's what we're doing. So
quite relevant this week that we saw the Georgia Guidestones actually blown up. Is that is there any clue as to who did that? Was it a pushback from anti-globalist people, or was it? Do you think they were removed?
I think that we would know if it was some form of sabotage. We would know about it. I think it was. I'm pretty positive one fell down first, and I think that might have just been like a let's get rid of it, let's show it's damaged, and then we'll take it down and say, oh, it was damaged itself.
There was a clip of it exploding, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's afterwards. I think they had to bring it down after, but still, I think a lot of this is going to be to do with the fact that they need to clean up their image, and once they do all of these Machiavellian plans and these and enter into their Malthusian notions into the real world, then suddenly they have to live by those words, and they realize that looks really bad on them. It looks really bad because most people don't want to see loads of people die. Most people don't want that. They just want to get on with their lives. They don't want that sort of crap. Instead, what you've seen is this them reverting, I think it's best to say, to old ideas such as potential nuclear war, war between East versus West, standoffs, political turmoil, things that they can handle, and things that they they need things that people know to blame their actions on, rather than say we need to do this for this agenda that we're creating. People, the people attached to it as well, have left way too many traces and trails around. Same with transhumanist agenda. So you talk to people who say, yes, but people like Barbara Marx Hubbard was a very nice old lady, yes, who believed in men being able to have sex with children. She wrote about it in her books. Oh, no, she didn't. Go read her books. Oh, God. Oh, she did. Okay, well, let's not talk about her. Let's talk about the other ones. Yeah, they were all her friends who believed and completely agreed with her and have done all of these terrible. Oh, don't look at that. No, okay. They have to keep destroying the words they say themselves, because the words they say themselves give them away and give up their game. So this is what I think we're seeing in what we've seen with the Georgia Guidestones, and what we will see with other things too. I think there's a real cleaning of the house happening right now.
What was your interpretation of Boris getting removed?
Just another part of the silly dance of pretend politics in the UK, and it's almost identical in one sense to David Cameron going, where he lost the ideological battle. There was no need for him to be around. For him, it was to stop Brexit. For Boris, it was to make Brexit happen. Well, Brexit, in a sense, I think, I don't know, did it happen? Who knows anymore? Brexit seems to have happened, and what they're going to do? Replace them with someone who's actually going to do something? The Tories historically have been set up to stop progress. That was the original intention of the Tory party when it was set up by Peel back in the 1800s. All of those conservatives were about stopping progress happening. But most of that is about stopping political progress happening, so that you can keep the current paradigm that works out well for them and keeps them voted into power and leaves only a couple of options.
But in terms of the World Economic Forum, though, I mean, Boris has spoken there before, and Sunak is obviously quite deep in. So, I mean, my point is there... What is the purpose of changing them, shuffling the deck from that point of view? Is there even any point?
It's all about making it seem to the people who care, who believe in politics, that it's a new era, a new time, and they keep having to do this. And what my bet is I got two bets. Two bets on what's going to come next. One is the Theresa May option. So that's Liz Truss getting into power. After David Cameron, they needed someone who could take all of the heat and seemed so po-faced and unable to be brought down by anything, and had the virtue of being a woman and all of this on their side. And they chose Theresa May, and Theresa May showed exactly that. I mean, she had already showed as Home Secretary, and through the avoiding abuse inquiries and stuff, that she could get away with lots and lots and lots. And she was I think Liz Truss is that woman, the useful idiot that gets put up for the period of instability just after, because they are knowing that they know that there's going to be massive financial turmoil coming, an almost forced implosion, a complete change in the way we have to live our lives, and they need someone who can take the beating for that, someone who they don't care about and someone the people don't care about. For that, I think Liz Truss is the top of the candidates, but she probably won't turn on the 1922 committee or whatever, whoever it is that votes in these potential candidates, the Tory membership. Well, that's got to be someone else who, if they really want success, and the only person I can think of who would be their perfect ideal would be Sunak, being that he is about to be financial implosion of the biggest kind. Why wouldn't you put up someone who's got the best interests of the bank first and foremost in his mind? So that it's either going to be the banker or the clown that comes in now. The person I think most likely is Sunak, but there is a time of instability coming, and whoever comes next is also going to be soon for the chopping board as well. There's got to be. The whole thing's collapsing. People don't realize what all of the change of the petrodollar. If you want to look at another thing Kissinger did, he created the petrodollar. He created American supremacy to continue financially by having oil only sold in dollars. That is ending. That is such a big thing for the American currency, and it's just happening at the time when they're going to introduce central bank digital currencies, and everything would have to change anyway. So is it a big shock? Everything is being torn apart from underneath just as they want to, and it's going to be pushed out just as they want to. So all of this is just games. It's just more games. Oh, look, you've got some accountability. Boris has to leave. Look, now we've got a new leader and they'll do better. None of it's true. No accountability from any time of anything Boris has done, or also wipes the slate clean from the whole COVID decision making. You know, all of the people who made those decisions. Oh, now they're not in power, so we'll just have to learn from that event and move on. You know, a lot of that is what we see in the world. Learn from the event, move on. Learn from the event, move on. That's what they want us to keep us in the frame of mind of.
By that logic, that's how I landed on it being. Tom Tugendhat that they would pick as the next person. I kind of figured they'd like try and go for a clean slate.
Well, I think
but not
too
really.
Close. He's too close to intelligence. He's way too close to intelligence. Tugendhat has got intelligence link. I can't say his name either. He's got too many intelligence links and a name that's too spicy to say. So yeah, I personally doubt that.
Well, he was at the Bilderberg thing last month, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah. And I mean that. There you go. They don't like to put those guys out front and center. They really don't like to. Not in governments, maybe in like things like World Economic Forum, because you got Klaus Schwab who attended those in the past and stuff, but not in government. They don't like that link to be there, I don't think. So I think you see the people who get put onto Bilderberg and stuff are heavily intelligence linked actors within society, within the state.
Yeah, that's very true. Are you struggling for time at this point? I think we said we'd go till about 6, didn't we? Or...
Yeah, no. I'm all right at the moment. If you got any more questions, I think I'm good. What time is it? Is 6? Yeah, so yeah, I should still be good.
Okie dokie. I've kind of my structure's just all over the shop at this point because we've kind of just darted off everywhere. Such is the nature of podcasts. Well, we briefly mentioned Ukraine earlier. Given that Putin and Zelensky are both, like we said, within the World Economic Forum one way or another, do you think that it's quite likely that this war is, like you said earlier, like a theatre war with puppets on both sides, just designed purely to give a reason for the crashing supply lines?
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the actual reporting that you see in Ukraine, the first 3 months of it especially, they were reporting of distant clouds of smoke in the sky 5-6 miles away. They were going up to people who were just like, what? Oh, I'm just catching the bus, or I'm just leaving, or stuff. And he's like, oh, what do you think about this war that's happening behind you that we can't get to, of course, because it's a war, so we can't go there. I mean, when we were young, they had a little bit more respect for us because they made it on the front lines. You know, they made out that they were on the front lines. They made out that they were just over there is where the fight. Look, just over there is where the shooting come from. I don't think most of it you can't see. You can't see it. It's not like that's a future war. You just can't see it, and most of the events seem to be staged events in some like way, like people lying on the floor who were flinching and moving and looking across like, are we done yet? I do believe that an actor who was a World Economic Forum young global leader sitting there acting like he's actually a leader of the country is so stupid. The fact that they have to bring in actors to meet him to give it some form
Stiller and Bonner,
yeah,
and
some sort of boost to the credibility. It's like, what are we? Are we in an awards ceremony in New York, or are we in a war between Ukraine and Russia? And then if you look at the history, 7 years before, you've got like a coup in Ukraine where the government loyalty flipped from one side to the other anyway. So it's not like there's been that much of a change during that time. And where's nearly all the fighting been? Along the borders, and Russia comes in, gently does a couple of things, comes out, gently does a couple of things. Most of the images you saw at the start were from other wars and were from other conflicts that people have shoved in there. There are people dying. They will kill people. These people don't care about the lives of people who they will use as collateral to convince other people that this stuff is really dangerous. But this ain't a war. We've lived through loads of wars. We've seen the devastation of war. This isn't a war. This is really a propaganda effort that looks like a propaganda effort, apart from to those who are so into the current things, and there's so many of them. They believe in whatever they're told at the time by the news, and it's hard to even. I mean, it's hard to even imagine how people can believe all of this. And me and friends of mine may sit there and go, "Oh my God, look how atrociously fake all of this is." But other people see the same thing and say, "Oh my God, I'm right round the corner to death." And that's what they want to do. They want to give you that feeling like, this could affect me and this could affect mine, and dead people on the streets, and I wouldn't like my parents to die and stuff. It's just insane. I don't think there's a real war happening, because if there was a real war happening, Russia would have won by now.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me whatever is going on is massively propagandized and also just designed to be a quagmire. You know, like it's not designed for either of them to win. It's just to pump weapons in there and to break down the supply chains. And then, oh, look, some more of Klaus Schwab's ideas need to be implemented to help us out. We'll eat some bugs or something because we can't get any grain out of it.
Oh man, they're doing that in my own home country where I am right now in Wales. They're like trying to introduce that to the kids at school. It's just, I think it's just a sickness, man. It's just a sickness. It's anybody has got to see. You could say like concrete can have has like an amazing amount of protein in, but you wouldn't want to feed your kids concrete. Why would you do the same with bugs? You know, it's like you could say these things and maybe they're true. I know concrete doesn't have protein, but you know, you could say these things, but do you want to do them? Do you actually want to eat bugs for the rest of your life? Do you want to be in this thing where you have to put extra sauce on because it's wriggly? Do you want to be in this world? Our ancestors would have been like, no, I would prefer the food you've got over there. Can I have the food you've got over there? Well, no, because we have to do fake wars to keep everybody in line, I'm afraid. So we can't afford to do that anymore. I think that's really much more is that they know that the more that they implement visual aids to their dystopia and through is the more likely you are that people will jump on board with other agendas that are fitting to that.
Yeah. Has Mark Drakeford got any World Economic Forum links?
Not that I've seen, but I think there's like when I looked through the British leaders, you get to Theresa May, and she's a bit of an anomaly because she wasn't necessarily a World Economic Forum young global leader, where nearly before that, for the 15 years before that, nearly everybody on both sides and all of the powerful people were all somehow attached. So why not Theresa May? Well, quite simply because she'll do what she's told. She doesn't need to go through a course. She's from an older generation. She believes the rhetoric. She believes in the plan. She understands that her power is at these places, and these places are telling her how to keep in her role and how to keep in her job. So she just goes through it. Mark Drakeford is an old boy. He believes in an old way of doing things, I think. And so that's what he's doing. He's doing just what he's told by the people. He's also trying to make it look, it's really terrible because these people are like, we want to show you we can do it first. And so the other people will say, well, we need to do this terrible thing now, and they'll be like, we'll do it first. So a lot of the time as well, it's like these smaller countries on the side like Wales are desperate to join in with the gang and to be appreciated by the boss. And the Mark Drakeford is not the boss.
I would put Nicola Sturgeon in that same bracket. She went on her world tour a few months back, trying to get in with the American government and whatnot. And I was looking through the Scottish government website to see if there was any records with the World Economic Forum. And in Christmas 2020, Ruth Davidson actually asks in Holyrood, can she have the records of any contact between the World Economic Forum and the Scottish government? And there wasn't much of a response, basically.
Well,
funnily enough.
It's amazing how that when you use the main channels that you're supposed to be able to use to get responses, that you suddenly get no response. I did it recently. I put in a freedom of information request on why Metropolitan Police supplied police to guard two senators in 2002, September the 1st, 2002, in Foxcote House in North Warwickshire. And I wanted to know the name of the two senators. It was refused to me, even though British, it should be known, and British police were supplied. But they can refuse it under national security and among a bunch of other reasons. And the reason they're hiding that is because Jeffrey Epstein was also there with his colleague, a colleague at the time, Nicole Younkerman, who was eventually also invested in a business with Jeffrey Epstein as well in 2000, as late as 2017, 2018, 2019, Carbine 9/11. So these processes for finding out information, they're only as good as the point when they say, no, we're not going to give you that information.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you obviously are quite thorough. Where can people find more of your work, and what have you got planned coming up in the future?
Ooh, I got some big stuff. Well, I got fungymonkey.com. So fungymonkey.com has lots of the media stuff on there. JohnnyVedmore.com for finding basic work. So I've been very busy recently and I've neglected it for about a month. Unlimited Hangout I write for. I should be writing some pieces for UK Column news as well very shortly. I'm currently I've put forward 4 articles that I proposed to them, which go back in time and follow a hidden history of London that not many people know about during the 50s and 60s, that basically the killing of a load of women, I think the killing of a load of women, so that gangland members and intelligence agents could take over a group of establishments that were then successfully taken over by just those people. And then where that led, which was the downfall of the British government and the almost collapse of the American government, which is going to be an extreme, hopefully it's a 6-part series. And that'll be quite intriguing for most. That's, I have some things that I do where I find a story and I've got to tell it, and some things which are really important to tell because of the current climate, current narrative that's going on. So on the current stuff, I am documenting the birth of the international seminar that Klaus Schwab attended, and some other details on it, and some other examples of people who were in power, who empowered through that event. A much more complicated sort of history. There are a few other big things coming. One of the big things, Whitney Webb has got a book coming out in a couple of months, Jeffrey Epstein book, and it's going to cover every single thing that you do not know about, and it is all the intelligence stuff is in there. And
I do like listening to Whitney on podcasts. She's very, like yourself, very thorough. A lot of mad stuff, about it. I think it sticks in my mind, Epstein's flight connections. Was it DynCorp that he was connected to in somewhere? Yeah, there's so much stuff. It's out of control, really, isn't it?
I look forward to speaking to people about some of that because I've been reading chapters as she's been proofing them and stuff as well at times. Of course I get a lot of the information early where she's like, "Oh my God, guess what I found," and it's nearly constant, and it is amazing. What is coming is gonna blow people's knickers off. it's clean off. Yeah, it'll be standing at the bus stop, shoot, no underwear anymore. Seriously, no kissing, straight in. It is really, really like there's some special stuff, and I think that sort of like research that we do leads to places we have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen in the next year. Whether I'll still be on this earth after the end of this year, because there's other things, including the Epstein cases. I am currently being attacked by one of the Epstein victims, who is one of the most prominent, most well-known, and turns out has exposed herself massively, trying to get me to jump on board with someone she was trying to plug into the independent media. And then I found out that this guy was a fraudster with 7 different aliases, convicted. He was a real bad character. He had worked with a guy who went on to molest children and stuff, and I wasn't interested in I couldn't approve him. I couldn't like say, oh no, he's all right. And I talked to this woman and I said, you want to be careful of this guy. Look at all of this stuff I found. And she turned on me massively, really quickly. And then I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to look into her now. And I discovered a selection of things that are really, that I've explained to someone who said, who's involved in the case, this could bring down the Epstein conviction against Ghislaine Maxwell. It's that serious. I think it's been made, the actual court cases against both Epstein before he died and Maxwell have been made to fall apart. And loads of people who gave, a few people who gave evidence are going to start being prosecuted soon, as involved heavily in what Epstein was doing. A lot of it was to try and distract people about the sex side of the stuff so they didn't look at the other stuff. And once you know the other stuff and how serious it is, and I can't even express how serious, until I've seen the evidence, I was completely unaware of how serious the intelligence ties with Epstein are, and how numerous they are, and how currently you're seeing them being sorted out in that way. There is more to come on the Epstein case that will, I fear, see the whole thing fall apart. and I'm about to be having to reveal some of that evidence when the time is right, and when it and I feel. I honestly, I spent about a week feeling sick to my stomach that I believed automatically what I was told by people who said they were victims. It's a very clever thing to say that you're a victim of something and then say, so that means that you have to believe me with all of these things. And a lot of the time, people just do that. Now, I also had I was a victim of grooming when I was young by a paedophile. I know what I feel the pain of the effects that it has, and that means I get even angrier when I discover someone's been lying about that sort of stuff to improve not only their own profile but their own credit rating quite drastically, their own amount of money they got in their bank account. And this is a conspiracy. It can only be called a conspiracy, and it dates probably starting about 2017, where there was a decision to clean up the Epstein case within the Trump National Security Administration, and someone was brought on, and from that point on, there has been a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that undermine the stories of multiple Epstein victims. One in particular, who is now heavily attacking me and Whitney because we wouldn't have a convicted fraudster who was an obvious liar into our orbit, into our world, and tell his story like it was a real thing, because it wasn't. So there's a lot to happen. There's a lot going to happen, and a lot where it's just going to be all balls out journalism, and that's all we can do. That's all we can do.
Yeah, I very much look forward to that. I mean, please don't die whilst you're doing that. I mean, that's some of that sounds absolutely terrifying at the same time, you know.
Yeah. I honestly, some of the things I've heard over the past year has been like, right, okay, which one of those is going to be the reason that I get offed in a car or etc. Because it just feels like one of them's got to be. What's really weird though is that you also have this element that you're seeing the people involved in the case getting knocked off, not the people investigating the case. So it's almost like they got so many people to knock off that they got a backlog. So I'm well down the queue. But I definitely feel like I'm in the queue now.
Yeah, wasn't there another Clinton White House person who got knocked off the other week?
Mark Middleton, who apparently hung himself with, I believe, an extension cord and shot himself in the chest. Now, I honestly,
it's one way to do it.
Yeah, honestly, he's not the first to die. In actual fact, lots of people don't know about how the other supposed Clinton death count, kill count, how they died, because some of them died in the most amazingly suspicious ways that you can't even. They don't even write about them. They don't even report it. So that is even more suspicious, and a lot of people will say this is just they're just lieutenants in the Bush crime family. That's it, and this is a crime family that's been going on a long time. Whether it's going to keep going on, we'll see. But over the next year, there will be information that comes out that will blow people's heads off, and it's usually about other people having their heads blown off. So I mean, there you go. Yeah, it all goes round in a big circle, murderous circle.
Yeah, well, on that note, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. I hope to see you again.
Join us next time for the Political Darkside podcast.
It's a disaster. Whose idea was that? It's just ridiculous.
Available on iTunes, Google, and Spotify.
For more information, visit politicaldarkside.com.